Hello, everybody. Got an episode for you today, which is UK versus USA. I think it's a pretty good episode. We've got a newcomer, which is American Woman. We have another episode coming out. I'm not sure when that's going to be. Sometime in the near future. And Dr. Onan is back for AI. So I've changed the theme tune a little bit today and added a few things in. Let me know what you think about it. If you don't like it, just shout at me and then I might put it back. Or I might just change it again. No, I'll put it back. I hope that you have a good time listening. It goes on for, I think, just over an hour. So if you've got enough time, why not listen to it all? Thanks very much.
Copy Endeavor, runway inside. Liftoff of mission 31D, the first flight of the orbiter Discovery, and the shuttle has cleared the tower.
One philosopher asserted that he knew the whole secret.
Welcome home, folks. Beautiful, beautiful. Furthermore, it reads, E is equal mc squared, in which energy is put equal to mass.
After serving the world for over 30 years, space haven't turned its back on history. It's come to a final stop. Apollo 10, Houston, 2 minutes to LOS. Everybody here says Godspeed. Okay, we'll see you later.
Hello, everybody. This is Drive Me to Your Leader with Mr. Red. And in this podcast, we hope to bring to you discussion, argument, and maybe just some fun on the way through. You know what? I've realized I sometimes do argument first and sometimes do discussion first. And I haven't decided which one sounds better. So, I'm going with discussion this week. So we've got American Woman here, a newcomer to the show, to talk about UK versus USA.
Yep.
And you're going to be defending the UK, aren't you?
No, not at all.
No, I'll be defending the UK, which I think's the impossible task. But you're going to be surprised, I think.
A lot of people from the US are probably going to be like, why is she defending this country anyway? So,
What, as in the US?
yeah,
Why do you think that?
because a lot of people don't like living in the US either.
Well, where would you live, though? That's a serious
It
question,
is.
isn't it? Like, if you didn't live in the US, where would you live?
I don't know, the entire world is a bit abysmal.
Abysmal. Jerry Tribbiani was abysmal. No, I just hear people say that when they live in the UK or live in the US or they live, I don't know, in France or whatever. It's like, well, if you didn't live there, where would you live? And they never really give me a good answer. Some people
No.
do. They're like, oh, I'd live in, like, I don't know, like Sweden or something. And then they come up with their own reasons for it. And it's like, oh, okay, but it's not a lot different, is it, really?
No. You get used to the things you don't like about the place you live or were born.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't move to Saudi Arabia.
Well, no.
And no offense if I don't think there's any listed in Saudi Arabia at the moment, but if they're, well, I suppose I'd be banned there though, wouldn't I? I've said a lot of things. I think we've all said a lot of things. I don't think there's any hope of us being in Saudi Arabia. You never know. I could break through the internet blockers of China as well. I could make it big, I could be like John Cena.
As a woman, there are quite a few places I wouldn't go just because I'm a woman.
As an American woman.
An American woman, yeah.
American woman.
Don't.
Right. So what's one good thing about the US that you think is you couldn't get anywhere else? You're going to go straight to food, aren't you?
Oh, yeah.
I read your mind.
I mean,
there.
well, no, I was thinking about driving
Oh, right.
firstly because I prefer driving in the US.
I do actually, to be honest.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Like here, where I am, which is a secret, undisclosed location that I never reveal, but it's obvious. It's almost like I wouldn't say it's quite rally driving, but it's just constant, like changing gears, turning, and then other people getting impatient and frustrated because there's no space. And over there, it was nice. You could cruise. It was a little bit boring.
I prefer that.
Oh, I don't know.
Because, like, yeah, you obviously still have to pay attention because you're driving, but you could put on cruise control and you don't have to keep turning it off and on for miles. You don't have to keep getting hit with roundabouts and stuff like that.
There's roundabouts in the US.
Yeah, but very few. They're usually
I've never seen
big
one, but I've
cities.
been told about them. So,
I think Washington D.C. has a big one,
oh, right.
and I think there's one in Seattle. I've heard that there's
It's almost like it's a tourist destination, isn't it?
there's a couple little ones like spread throughout the entire country, from what I've heard.
Do people get to it and like, oh no, what do I do? My training has not prepared me for this. Eject.
just keep going in a circle?
Or like on The Simpsons when they go to London.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
They get in like the very middle lane and then just keep going in a circle.
How do we get out of here?
Yeah.
I don't know. So you're going to say, out of all the things, you're going to say driving?
I do miss driving over there. I do.
Yeah, but there must be something else,
Well, on that. Okay. Well, food. I do miss.
Like what?
Oh, so much. I miss the Chinese food.
It's exactly the same.
No, it's not.
Well, what's
over
different?
here, you get.
She's saying over here, as in the UK. I mean, the undisclosed location that we're not revealing. So...
It's quite obvious, okay? But I mean, like in the UK, you get like chips.
What's wrong with that?
Or you call fries in America, but
No.
we don't do
We've
that.
had this discussion.
But-
I don't understand that terminology.
Okay, we're not going to get into that discussion.
Well, I think that we should.
No.
Hang on a minute.
No, that goes
No.
on for far too long.
No, I've got to get this out, right? So you say fries, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I understand that, right? When you're talking about like the little thin ones, the French fries, I get
Yeah.
that. I'm on board with that. But what about when you get the thicker? I say chips because they're bigger and they're different shape, and they're just not the same. They don't necessarily taste the same.
Well, and I've talked to you about this before, and as you know, I'm like a potato queen. I know all the names of like all the different types of cuts of stuff.
Potatoes.
I love potatoes, and I understand why you call them chips. I do. I get it because they're chips off a potato. But then again, I kind of understand the way crisps are as well, and how in America we also call those chips because
Hang
they're
on,
chips
I was going to get
of a
onto that
potato.
because this is the thing. It doesn't make sense, right? I'm sorry to everybody. You're going to hate me, but the fact of the matter is, when you come over here, you know what you're talking about. If you say fries, well, you're going to get your fries. If you say chips, you're going to get chips. If you say crisps, you're going to get crisps. When I go over there, how do I say I want chips without them giving me crisps, right? How do I do that? I can't. Do I just say large fries? But then they give me a really big bag of large French fries. So what do I do?
Are you?
How do I explain that?
Are you going to really complain about a bunch of food?
Yes, and I've got more actually.
Have self-control. You don't have to eat them all.
No. I've got no. The story gets worse. It gets deeper. You know what I'm about to say.
Yeah, I know what you're about to say.
We went to this restaurant and it was very nice. It was very
Granted,
nice.
I do have to add a disclaimer. Where I lived was nowhere near an ocean.
Well, hang on. No, I'm sorry. You're not getting out of it like that. So it was very nice and they had very nice food and the service was great. And I can't remember the name, so I'm not exactly advertising it anyway. But on the menu, it said fish and chips. And bear in mind, I've been out of, my home country for a while. And I thought, you know what, that sounds really nice. It's been a long time since I've had that or even looked at it. I thought, they know what they're doing. They'll bring it out. And they brought out the fish. Fair enough. That was right. And then they brought out potato wedges. Potato wedges with fit. That's not how it works. It's not fish and potato wedges. It's fish and chips.
But it's
this
still
is the
some
problem.
sort of
It gets
potato.
deeper. We don't know what we're talking about anymore.
The thing is,
the terminology. I can't stand it.
Is I warned you before you ordered that it might not be what you think it is.
But all they had to do was cut some potatoes up, put them in a fryer, right? Take them out and put them on a plate. But they gave me potato wedges, but they probably put in the oven. And I don't understand that.
Okay, when I go to KFC in the US, they give me potato wedges. I go to KFC here, and it's fries.
No, but this is the point, right? This is the point, right? Potato wedges are cooked differently, and that's why it didn't work.
It's still a potato.
But
Why?
This was like 4 years ago, and I have not let this go.
I will not stand for potato discrimination.
But it wasn't the same, and it didn't work. So the terminology, I can't get on board with that.
Okay, well.
So if you've tuned in just now to hear about serious discussion between, the different political climates of the US and the UK, what you're actually getting is
potato talk.
Potato wedges and crisp terminology.
Okay. When it comes to crisps, then, do you prefer the American salt and vinegar or the British one?
There's no difference. What do you mean? Why are you holding your hands up like there's no difference?
Because you told me that the Lay's one was better than the Walker's one.
Yeah, but you know what that is, though? Because they're the same company, aren't they?
Yeah.
Right? But you know what that is? That's a bit like your neighbour's grass is always better than yours. Do you know what I'm saying? You turn up, it's in this big bag, and it said something different, but it looks the same. It's like, oh, this is nice. Oh, bloody hell, what's that meme? Bloody hell, this is nice, this is. I'll tell you what.
This is...
That's what Lay's... This is bloody nice, this is.
That's another thing that it's a bit... what I'm about to say is a tiny bit political. Because,
oh, no, how dare you do that on this controversial show?
And I've talked to you about...
I think last week or whenever it was, literally was calling Jesus a con man. So if you're about to one-up that, you've got some competition, to be honest.
But in the UK and a lot of Europe, they're very into the environment. Gotta help the environment. We gotta use less of all of this stuff.
Right.
But when it comes to crisps...
What do you mean?
It's always in single packets. You get a big bag, and it's filled with a bunch of single packets.
You can get the share packet, but it's nutrition. That's what it is. You don't want people overeating.
Yeah, but so it's here. You can either learn to have willpower and stop eating, and not sit and eat an entire family-sized bag.
I get that.
Or you can produce more litter and then have a bunch of people complain about litter.
Yeah, but the crisp packets, believe it or not, is quite a difficult one for recycling because you can't put them in a normal recyclable package for the simple reason the freshness gets lost and then they go stale. And that's why we haven't... So they burn them and it produces energy. That's the only thing we can do with them. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
But, it's... We do have those share bags, but they're called share bags. When you go in the US, they're like, yeah, just pick this up. And it's just this huge one packet. Yeah. It's like, this is just, what, are you going to eat all this now? Yeah.
I like
that choice, but if I had it day after day, I don't know if that would be great.
We do also sell like the big bags of, single packets, but there's variety in them. It's not just one type.
No, there's variety packs here.
Yeah, like...
I just don't know.
Here's a big bag. There's only 6 little bags, and there's 3 flavors, so you only get like 2 of each. In the US, you can get like a 20 bag, and there's like 5 different flavors.
Yeah, but I've ate the same flavor of crisps for like all my life actually. So
oh my god, that's why I feel like you have no taste buds because vinegar has just stripped them.
I have barbecue once in a while, but they stopped doing them in the UK. Yeah. I suppose that's a negative, isn't it?
Yeah, they don't. Another thing is, I prefer Ruffles brand.
Right.
Chips, I'm gonna say, because I'm American.
Crisps.
And they have cheddar and sour cream is my favorite, and I can't get them anywhere unless I want to pay like 30 pounds.
You guys don't have cheese and onion over there either. So anyone who's listening from the UK, I've never found cheese and onion in the US.
I think Lay's does a cheese and onion.
No, I couldn't find it. We never found that once. Salt and vinegar wasn't even a popular flavour over there. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it.
It's because we have variety. We have more
on
options.
The shelf. It was at the bottom.
It's because
almost like people didn't want to. They were embarrassed of it. Oh, salt and vinegar here in Walmart. How dare they?
Another thing is when it comes to Lay's and Walkers is when it comes to color coding, it's different. So like in the US,
blue,
salt and vinegar is blue in the US, whereas cheese and onion is blue.
The thing is, years ago, Walkers, it used to be the other way around.
Yeah.
Salt and vinegar used to be green. That was a very long time ago.
So it's
that's showing how old I am, I suppose, but that's true.
Yeah.
So I don't know why it switched. I don't. Maybe it was like a marketing ploy or something.
Maybe I don't remember what.
I think green works
Regular
better though. Oh, I
salted.
don't know. I don't know actually. I'm not sure.
I don't know. I get and I order ranch, so I miss that, but I have to have it.
Yeah.
I didn't even eat it that much until I came here, and I was just like, "Oh my god, I miss it so much." It was the convenience of just getting it whenever I wanted.
So what do you not like about here then? Oh, she's getting out a list. Hang on.
I'm thinking. I'm picking and choosing. Driving, obviously. Some of the food options are very limited.
Yeah, well, we talked about that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean,
Oh, let me see. Shopping.
shopping?
Yeah,
It's no different.
Like, just when I lived in the US, if I just wanted to hop to the dollar store to buy something, I could just hop in my car,
Hang on.
go.
Have you
Get
heard
it
of
done.
Poundland?
Yes, but here, because everything is so congested,
Everything
and
is a
most
pound, isn't
and
it,
most of
yeah?
the time you have to pay for parking, and it's usually very far away.
Well, you have to pay for parking in the US, in the cities.
Yes, but I didn't live in the city in the US. I
Well,
didn't
I'm
have
so
to pay
sorry.
for parking.
Well, you know, we have Poundland, you know?
I know, but
That's almost as
I'm
good as
not-
the Dollar General. Actually,
No.
if anything, no, the Dollar General was a better deal.
Yeah.
Not everything's $1 in the Dollar General. That's what I learned. I was very
but
disappointed.
it's still cheap. You went in
But
and
in
you got it.
Poundland, everything is a pound, I think, more or less.
Okay, you went into.
That's why it's called Poundland.
Okay, I took you into the dollar store and you bought a Slinky.
I still have that to this
Yes, you
day.
do.
It was great. No,
It's just
honestly,
like
I
you
still
just
have it. I
went
get
and
it
got
out
a
sometimes.
Slinky.
No, I'm serious. That was the best. That's the best investment I've ever made, actually.
Oh, Butterfingers.
yeah,
Before
but
they changed.
yeah, but I can buy them here now.
Yeah, but they changed the what's it called?
The recipe.
The recipe.
Well, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I thought they were
when
okay.
you first had them, it was the original recipe, but
Right.
and I think 2018 or something.
I didn't notice a great deal of difference, to be honest.
I did, but I mean, they're still nice.
Hmm.
You can't find anything like that like anywhere. The texture and all that, it's very different.
You know what, though? I think I would still rather live in the UK than the US.
I'd rather live in the US.
Well, the thing I found about myself over there is I always feel out of control. I don't know, part of that's because I'm not from there, but I don't know.
You're not used to all that freedom.
I don't know if the word freedom is right. I guess it is in a sense. I can't quite explain it. You don't feel like you know you're eating half the time. I don't feel like I know. I feel like information's harder to come by over there. I guess that's the way. I feel like it is. I can't quite explain it. And on everyday life. But then again, that could just be the fact that I don't live there and I'm not aware of a lot of things, I suppose. I get that.
It's like most information you can get. They're very open about information. They're not going to hide anything from you.
I also wouldn't live in New York. Do you know, I've never been to New York inside the city, but I landed on a changeover at JFK Airport, as you know. And it was just the worst airport experience I've ever had in my life. It was crazy because as we landed onto the airport, the runway there was just plane after plane lined up behind our one. It was just constant. Like every minute there's a plane landing. I just feel like there's a really poor wrinkled man in the dark corner of the ATC tower, just like carrying, please no more planes, please no more planes. I
know
couldn't
you
do
were
it. I couldn't, and that's not where it ended.
No.
I then went inside. I couldn't get a seat, and what was it? A meal at McDonald's was like $15. There was people everywhere. The person at the till was, or whatever you call it there,
Register.
the register was. She wasn't very happy, and I don't really blame her. This was before they bringing the automated screens in that they've done in the last few years, but it was a terrible experience, absolutely terrible. And the one person that summed up for me, there was this a sort of larger black lady who walked past me, And as she went past, she said to her friend, "This terminal is fucked up." And I went, "Yeah, that literally
Yeah.
is exactly the best thing about that trip was they have that Wi-Fi company, don't they? That you have to pay
Yeah.
for. Well, I don't know what happened, but I just connected to it and I was on there for like 3 hours. And then they sent me an email about 2 weeks after and they were like, "Can you pay us what you owe us for using the Wi-Fi?" And I was just like, I'm going to ignore that. And
Now they're
like,
gonna find
I
you.
still haven't paid it. And it's like 7 years later. So that's, or was it 6 years later? So I think I've got away with that.
Well, you haven't been back since.
Going to land in Chicago. Next time they're just going to haul me away, aren't they? What did I do? What did I do?
Before, because you were excited about that layover in New York, because
I'm not now.
You loved
That was a disaster.
the romanticization of New York until you actually go there. It's like
It was an experience. Like I'm glad that happened, but at the same time, I don't think I'd do it again. I would land at LaGuardia or sort of something like on Newark or something. JFK is a absolute hell of an airport. It really is.
Yeah.
It's not as good as you think it is. It's really not.
Yeah, I would never even take a layover in New York.
No.
Unless something like really bad happened, like the plane was on fire and had to land.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm kind of glad that I live here, if I'm honest with you. I just feel...
Well, you've grown up here. You know everything about it. It makes sense to you.
Well, yeah, I suppose it's that. I don't think that... I don't know. Because I always feel like there's some people that say, "Why did you end up choosing to live here instead of over there?" And I was a bit like, well, I suppose it's because I just had everything set up. But...
Yeah. So it's comfortable for you. You know what to expect.
Another thing that I didn't really like about it is when I looked up a lot of the employment rights stuff that they have, and I know it varies slightly state by state, but it's not great. Like a lot of it is very in favour of the employer. I don't know if anyone's ever looked that stuff up, but compared to here, I find that, I mean, to be fair, it's got worse here as well, employment stuff, but I find it's not great at all, to be honest.
I think in Illinois, where I'm originally from, I think they're very, like, from what I've heard, like, unions are pretty big for most
yeah,
jobs.
But that's the same here. That's if you're lucky enough to be in a job that's got one set up. But I'm talking about if you don't have that, and many jobs don't here, many jobs don't over there in the US. But in those situations, I think it's in favour of the employer a lot more over there for the simple reason I tend to find there's a lot more statutory regulation in the UK over this stuff than there is in the US. The US is a lot more, oh, just get on with it yourself. And that's all well and good. You say, well, you've got freedom and all the rest of that. But sometimes you just want a bit of standard protection.
A lot of jobs over there do have that.
I find it's a lot of it's in favour of the employer, I found.
No, every job I've ever had has been especially if it's more than just me speaking up to the manager, like, you can't function the place if all of your workers are basically saying, "Hey, look, this isn't right. We can't do this if you don't fix this."
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It
just depends on this, like you said, the state.
What's the
also
basic
depends on
holidays over there? So for here, the minimum basic they can give you is 20 days plus 9 of the bank holidays, depending if you're in a retail job or whatever. So it'd be about 29. What's the minimum there? That's what I mean. You don't even know the minimum. I don't even know if it has one. I'm not even sure, to be honest.
Every time I've had to,
This is what I'm saying.
Every time I've had to take time off work, obviously I haven't had a job in which I made more than minimum wage, and
right,
so, and I was part-time most of them. But they did grant me that time off. It wasn't paid, but they didn't fight me about it.
Yeah, no, the thing is, I think that's, if you had a bad employer, they might have done. This is what I'm saying. And here, they wouldn't have been able to, because they have to give you a minimum set about. I actually had a disagreement before with an employer years ago, and they messed up their electronics of it, their system of it, and they ended up trying to give me 19 for a year. And I was like, no, you have to give me it. This was excluding the bank holidays. You have to give me a minimum of 20. And she was arguing with me about it. I said, you can't do it. It's illegal. And she didn't like it. but that's the way it was.
Yeah. Well, I know, like,
So that's what I'm kind of talking about there. That sort of minimum statutory regulation.
yeah. Well, I know, like, the main top careers that people need, like, you can't be without, are, like, you know, like nurses, truckers, all of those that you need them. And I think they, for the most part, as far as I know, because I grew up around nurses and my grandfather was a truck driver, they've got like the best.
Yeah.
They did get the best. So, because they had to fight for it.
Mm.
And they did get it. So, but I don't know what it is like in every company, every
That's what
other
I'm saying.
state.
But here, this is what I mean about more in control. But here, it's not ambiguous. There's that regulation that states that it has to be like that countrywide. And I know people in the US especially get a bit shifty about that sort of thing because they think, oh, government intervention. And I get that. But at the same time, isn't it just standard reasonable thinking to think that a basic set of rules that apply to everyone is probably a fair game?
Yeah, I
don't think there's any argument for that, is there?
I do know a lot of people, like in our generation and younger, are fighting back, you know, against
Well, they're not,
like all that. They're trying.
Well,
to.
they're not, because if you look at, you know, if you are in that age group and you're listening, you're probably not, because the statistics say that they're the most likely to be positive about unions, but they're the least likely group to be part of one.
Yeah.
You have to ask yourself, if they were that bothered about it, they would all be in unions by now, but they don't seem to be. It's all well and good talking about something, but unions is about taking action.
Well, no, I
the point.
Personally, I think unions for most jobs and careers are pretty essential, because otherwise you could just basically modern slavery at that point. They could do whatever they want.
No, some things are illegal, but at the end of the day, like, I don't.
I do have to say that in the US, maternity leave is a joke.
You can even get paternity leave here. You get 2 weeks.
So I think
that's what I'm saying. Like, this is the kind of argument I'm trying to make a little bit on this, is that I feel a bit more in control because I feel like there's something behind me that gives me that basic, let's all play by the rules kind of deal. Whereas in the US is a bit more like, go and sort yourself out. And it's like, that's fine. But if something goes wrong, that's it. You're done.
Although,
you know?
I will say this, I do feel a bit safer in American hospitals than I do here. Because it's
but
cleaner. The hospital that I was in, I mean, you got your own room, whereas over here it seems like everyone's stuffed into like an old building.
Well, hang on though. Hang on, because you might be in your own private room, but you're with your own private cost. There's a reason why you're in a private room, because the hospital knows they can make more money.
I never had to pay for it.
Well, you would have done, or the insurance company would have done. Someone had to pay for it. That's the point. I don't know your situation at the time, but, you know, someone somewhere had to pay for it, and the hospital got paid for it.
Well, they can't but they can't let you die. Like me, I had seizures. They couldn't just let me have seizures.
But you say that, but in places such as, I don't know if India still practices this, but India and some other African nations, they will let you die if you can't pay. Mm-hmm. That's a reality over there. They won't put you in debt. They'll just more often than not let you die. And I think that's awful. So I give you that. But at the same time, I don't think...
But although I've heard, and I know you have told me that this is pre-pandemic, that it was perfectly fine, the NHS, GPs, all that.
It wasn't. No, it's not been fine for a long time.
Well, I just like now, just the ability just to talk to a doctor. Like in the US, I had a set doctor. Now I don't, and I don't know who I'm talking to. And when they call, they're very just quick to get off the phone. It's like they don't want to help. It's like, you're having this issue. Here's some, and I've noticed this is a very common theme since being here, is they throw SSRIs at you. Like, oh, you're having this issue? Here's sertraline. There's like
antidepressants for anybody that's not aware.
Yes, just sertraline is like their holy grail cure for everything. Oh, paracetamol and sertraline. Here you go.
Ibuprofen.
It's
ibuprofen gel.
Awful. Also, thank you for mentioning that. Another thing, when you go to the store and you have to buy like ibuprofen, paracetamol, you're only allowed to get 2 boxes at a time.
Yeah, so people don't kill themselves.
Yeah, but that's why you put something like from what I've known, from what I've heard from, my mom who was a nurse, that they put something in, the ibuprofen and all that in the US. So if you try to overdose, it actually makes you vomit it up after you take a certain amount. That actually happened to me on accident because I had root canal tooth pain so bad.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's just a safety precaution. It's not a big deal, is it really? I mean, they're not disallowing you. I mean, you go into the shop near it and get another 2 packs. There's nothing really stopping it. Basically,
it's inconvenient.
Well, no, I know that. But what it's basically saying is if you're having this thought right now, then maybe if you had to go to another store, you've given yourself 10 minutes to think about it.
Yeah, but you could, I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but you could go to the pharmacy and get codeine over the counter.
Yeah, but the idea is that they're meant to give you some sort of interview process, even though it's not,
No, they don't do that.
They ask you questions if you buy codeine.
What, like
what are you going to do with it and things like that?
I've gone to the pharmacy and asked for it because I was having that tooth pain real bad.
Yeah.
And all they asked was, "Are you taking it?" I said, "Yeah, it's for me." And that was it.
They're legally advised to ask you more than that, to be fair. But
I think it probably depends on who's working, but it's like...
Yeah, but the thing is about the health system in the UK is it's not bad because... It's bad because of how it's been run and how it's been managed.
Yeah.
And I don't say... The thing is, you get the government here who always talk about all the investment they're making into the NHS. There's been a lot of building work going into the NHS. That's true. The problem is they're just throwing money in it and they're not really looking at the problems, which are a lack of staff, a staffing problem, which they're doing nothing about whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it's also an increase in usage. So even if they build new buildings, which they are, they've got no one to run them. And the biggest problem with that is because about 20 years ago or so, maybe a bit more than that, they made nurses go to university instead of an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
Well, why that decision? Why a nurse needs such high education? I don't understand. I'm not saying that as a negative. I know they're very intelligent people. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying that I don't understand why they need to go through years of higher education when they should be on the job learning how to put needles in arms.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? And
like my mom told me when she was in nursing school, they didn't even, and I don't know how nursing schools differ from here and in the US.
Right.
And this was like 20 years ago. She told me that they didn't even teach her how to do an IV. They just handed her the needle and said, "Here, do an IV." I mean, I learned phlebotomy, so I learned, basically how to do that and draw blood and all that. But they just, in nursing school back then, they were just like, "Here you go, learn it, do it yourself."
Yeah, and I don't understand. I mean, maybe not quite that extreme, but like an apprenticeship or whatever, I don't understand why they have to university. So they've got a staffing problem with that. I mean, doctors are going to university for years and years, and the cost that they're paying, I don't understand why anyone would go to university for £9,000 a year.
I mean,
and they're making it actually more intense when you start paying it back. I think it stays with you for 40 years instead of 30 now. And when you start earning over £25,000 a year, you start paying it back. Now, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to go and, become a doctor or a nurse for 5 to 7 years of higher education and then end up with over £60,000 worth of debt. When in those 5 to 6 years, I could have got myself a career somewhere else, earning a lot of money without the need to. I don't, and this is the problem. There's no staff. No one wants to do that.
Well, and not just that, but what it seems like is because GPs seem to be just disappearing. Now the nurses,
the pressures of the job, isn't it?
It's putting all of the pressure on the nurses to get stuff done when obviously nurses can't prescribe medication and all that, but they have to do what they can because the GPs just don't seem to be very interested in their job anymore.
I don't even understand. I mean, I'm not going to talk about pay in the NHS because I think it's standard that you pay people over the rate of inflation so they don't become poverty-stricken, to be perfectly honest with you.
Most of them are, unfortunately.
I mean, all the places they waste money. I know what's so wrong about paying people what they're worth. I don't understand that at all. And put that alongside the fact that they're going to be tens of thousands of pounds in debt. Why would you do it? And this is the thing I don't really understand. It's set up to work. the system will work. And well, it'll be difficult to get it to work in this modern time with more surgeries, more operations than they had when it was set up.
Yeah.
I get that, but it's not impossible. There's been a few political choices that have led to this disaster that we have of a health system. It's not the health system itself that's failing. And that's the frustrating thing. And it's the frustrating thing trying to explain that to people on the outside when they say, oh, look, this is how this government-run system works. And it's like, well, you're right in the sense that the government are the ones failing it.
Yeah.
But you're wrong in the sense that it's the system itself that's failing because it's the system. And it's not.
Yeah.
And it's really frustrating because over 20 years ago, it was working fine. Now, what's the difference? Well, there's been some political decisions, and the first one being education.
Yeah.
Making it, they're basically, both parties over the last 20 years have put up walls in education.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
And that, I mean, and
Roots to people's careers.
And as long as you've known me, I wanted to be a nurse. I wanted to, because I was in college and then I had to drop out, and I wanted to go back to be a nurse. I wanted to do nursing school because I grew up all around it. My grandma was a nurse. My mom's a nurse. My aunt is a trauma nurse. Like, and now I have a couple cousins that are nurses as well.
Yeah.
And so I grew up looking at my mom's medical books and all that. So I seen some pretty grody stuff from a young age. So it interested me. But since coming here and seeing that, yeah, I could still be a nurse if I wanted to, but coming here and seeing how nurses are being paid and how they're being treated, I just am like,
yeah,
I would not want to be a nurse here. I would not want to put myself through that. With my job now, it's already stressful.
People that are exactly the same as you. Why would I want to do that when I can go and do something else completely unrelated? Or why would I do that when I can go into the private system instead and earn more money?
Yeah.
You know, all kinds of things. And so there's that. And I think the system itself, I've been alive when it's worked and it was very good. And if that system didn't exist, there's a lot of people out there that would be in terrible health positions.
Yeah.
And like they are now because of the way the system is. But years ago, it worked.
Yeah, a lady I know.
It really did. Then there's no understanding that.
Yeah, a lady I know actually. And this just proves to show how, the system and you've heard stories about this where people aren't finding out they have like cancer until it's like stage 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Because the NHS just shrugs off their symptoms or whatever.
Yeah.
And children are dying from illnesses, but a lady I know, her husband had been displaying issues for a long time, and he actually had family history of this issue. And
right.
I was there when she got a call that her husband had just then been diagnosed terminal brain cancer.
Right.
And the doctors, he kept going to the doctors for years saying, look, I'm having all these issues. They didn't bother, doing tests and all that. And they didn't even bother looking at the history that both his brothers had brain cancer.
It's odd, isn't it? It works like that. It's very strange.
And then when I had spoken to her last, he had just basically died within a month.
No, that's really sad.
Because they didn't even bother looking at medical history, which they do not look at medical history here at all.
Sorry to change the subject ever so slightly, but do you know what's really interesting is the fact that kind of brain cancer can be, I guess it's basically genetic in that case. And I'll tell you why, because what cancer basically is, and I'm probably simplifying this heavily, but what it basically is, leaving aside the radiation that causes it most of the time, is it's cells that have been repaired but improperly repaired, and they create cancer cells. And you have to ask yourself what was going on in that family for those particular cells to not genetically regrow correctly.
Yeah.
It's just crazy, isn't it? And they actually have, and it astonishes me, a system of using radiation therapy for brain cancers.
Yeah.
And what it does, I can't remember it completely, but it's like this little, almost like a laser that's very pinpoint. And I want to say it shoots beta particles into the certain part of the brain, but I could be wrong. And it shoots it pinpoint in this one little part of the brain, and that'll kill the cancer. But like you say, obviously when it spreads and it's throughout the brain, there's no chance.
Well, it's like...
it astonishes me how someone's come up with that, because radiation, the thing that causes cancer, can also cure it.
Fighting fire with fire.
Well, yeah, I just think it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, like anyone can get a brain tumor. it doesn't mean
Well,
it's
yeah.
cancerous, and
Yeah,
it
I don't
doesn't necessarily run.
understand that.
Like
I
my
know
brother
someone,
has a
yeah.
brain mass.
I don't know
and
what that means though. Does it like
It-
put pressure on the brain, give you headaches, or like what?
I where it was located, they didn't think it was worth it to remove it because it was. They
What
said it
is
was
it,
close
though?
to.
If
They
it's not
just said
cancerous, what is it? Like,
they-
that's the bit I don't get.
I think with
Just a
they look
collection of
around
cells.
they look around the edges to see if
But it's weird how
if
like
it might
a
be
collection of
cancerous.
cells have come together and just created something which is, well, another way of putting it, entirely worthless almost.
Well,
Like it's got no point. Like,
mean,
why did
he's-
it get created? It's so strange, isn't it?
I mean, when he was younger, he had a heart condition, and so it made him have seizures. And I don't know, it could have easily just been an old brain injury that
Mm.
formed and became a mass or scar tissue or something. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I've seen his brain scans though, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, I don't. So I don't know, but I will say something about the US system. On the surface, it looks good, and I know obviously the treatment's there. But when I went into a US hospital, I think I've been in 2 now, haven't I? And on the first thing I noticed on the door
yeah,
is the no entry sign with a gun in it. Basically,
Yeah.
no guns inside. The fact that a modern country has to display that sign in the door to a hospital scares me. And I don't mean it in the sense of I'm scared of weapons. I mean, I've shot guns before. It's not a big deal. But like the fact that you have to put that there shows how rife that kind of ballistic weapon use is in that country, which is astounding. It's astounding to me. Why? I don't understand why a civilized nation with a civilized populace needs that kind of firepower so
I mean-
en masse. It's maddening to me.
I mean, I don't want to get on the topic of like guns and all that
I don't
because
understand
I
the
don't really
necessary
have
requirement of it. I don't know.
because it doesn't really matter. You can ban it all you want.
Yeah.
It's still gonna happen. Just like over here.
No, but it doesn't.
Over here, you can
No.
ban knives because there's a lot of stabbings.
Well, yeah, but people always come up with the argument. But it's like if someone was carrying a knife and coming at me, I'd be terrified. I'd do what I'd run away or maybe try to get off them or whatever. I don't know, whatever the moment is. But if someone pulls out a gun, what am I going to do? I can't run. They're just going to shoot me. It's a
thing
whole
is you
different
can try-
ballgame.
you
It's
can-
not even the same argument.
You can try
actually.
and ban one weapon, but a new one's going to pop
no,
up.
it works. And I'll tell you this. This is why it works.
But are people still being killed?
No, but hang on. Right. So in Australia, the last massacre they had with deadly weapons was the Port Arthur massacre shooting. And if you're not aware of it and other people aren't aware of it, I'd actually point you to the Case File episode, which is a podcast that's really good. They did an episode on it and they did it really well. It's very sad. Basically, this guy who had a really low, I don't know way of putting it, brain maturity. He had like the age of someone much younger than
Like a
himself. He wasn't like a child in his age, but he wasn't like an adult. And he was a bit strange and he was quite a big chap. And one day, for reasons probably unknown entirely, he decided to go to Port Arthur, which I think is a national park, if I remember. It's that kind of place. Turned up there and just gunned everybody down that he could with automatic weapons. And Australia, their government, decided from that to ban the use of weapons, or at least restrict them as heavily as they are in the UK.
Yeah.
The UK had the same thing. They had massacres with guns as well. I'm not saying,
There's been a couple shootings here within the past year, though.
yeah, but not on the scale that happened in the past.
No,
And
but
since
it's
that,
still.
Australia's gun crime went downhill massively, and those sort of massacres are a thing of the past. In the US, they still exist, and I have to say, you know, people always say, "Oh, it's the person, it's not the weapon." It's like, that's fair enough. I agree with that. It is the person. You're right, but at the same time, if you give that person a more deadly weapon than they otherwise would have access to, you make them more dangerous than they previously were. And I think that's the bottom line. I don't see another way around that on a reasonable
But
level.
also, I think one thing we can agree upon with both countries
Mm.
is at the core of it, mostly, is access to mental health.
Well,
And I know a lot of the murders are committed by men, and men
Yeah.
don't necessarily want to seek help, or they're told when they're young, Boys don't cry. They don't do
if I
that.
was taking on Jordan Peterson perspective, I'd probably say they've got more aggression and more testosterone. And but it's to be fair to him, that's true. That tends to be why they're more aggressive and they shoot at people, I guess.
I mean, that's why they
But let's not go into
encourage rough and tumble play with, young boys, toddlers, because it helps, get their energy
Well,
out
let's not
and all
get
that.
into that minefield. There's people out there that would just would cry at you for saying
But we
that,
could
maybe.
both
I don't know.
agree that when it comes to accessing mental health here and in the US, it's
See, that's weird. So
extremely bad.
you'd think on a private system it would be in the US the way it works. They would have the same access. But then again, I suppose insurance companies don't want to insure it. Maybe is that right?
I think it. I don't know. It might
I have no idea.
depend. I have no
If
idea.
you know, email us. I guess I don't know.
Yeah. Depends on the type of insurance you have, or if you're on government assistance. I think you're probably, if you're on government assistance like Medicaid, you're probably more likely to actually be able to talk to a counselor and get the medication you need.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because that's how I got into counseling.
I think a lot of the problem as well is that, again, I don't think there's, and I don't know about this, but I would say where it's still an emerging science. Like you wouldn't, like if you're going to fix a broken arm, I think we're pretty set on how we would do that, right? That's a developed science, medical science. I think the problem with the psychological side, it's still, even though it's been around for however many decades, it's still a very emerging science. And this is why I get a little bit worried about some of the people that are coming out with some of their ideology. I won't go into it. Some of their ideology about the mind and identity, people's thoughts. I'm not going to go into it, but it worries me because they create it. They take a medical issue and they make it a social, like, I don't know why I'm putting it, a social cause, and that's not the same thing. Like if you look at a medical issue for the lens of a social cause, you're going to come up with a weird wrong answer, and that's what worries me about a lot of the identity stuff.
Well, let's talk about mental illness. I know what you're talking about.
I was going to, but
there are other mental illnesses out there as well.
No, it's not that. I was going to. I was saying. I think because it's an emerging science still, you leave room for people to come in and give those sorts of theories.
Yeah.
And actually, I don't even think they think they're theories. I think they're actually 100% proven, and they're not, and it's scary. But that's what I mean. I think it's a very emergent thing, and I think that's why it's difficult to know how to treat it on any part of it. And I think there'll be a lot of things that we're doing now that in 50 years will be considered completely wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, that's always true, but I think especially in this topic.
And I feel like it's much harder to diagnose people nowadays because things could be comorbid together. Like bipolar and borderline personality. You could actually end up having both. They could be comorbid together, or you could have ADHD and autism, but they've kind of stuck ADHD under the autism umbrella, but yet they still kind of try and separate it because you can have ADHD,
I think they're
autistic.
different things, yeah.
So, I mean,
I know people that have ADHD and they definitely aren't autistic.
Like I have anxiety, I have generalized anxiety disorder. I did have depression as a teenager, but I've kind of come out of that. But they still like to say, "Oh, you're just depressed." No, I have anxiety. So I don't want, I'm not depressed.
What do you think about people like Andrew Tate who say that depression isn't actually real?
I don't want to talk about.
You don't. You don't have to talk about him as such. I just feel like that statement. Then, what do you feel about that?
I'm sorry. What did he say?
So he said that depression isn't actually a real thing.
That sounds like something a boy with no jawline would say.
Oh no! I'm sorry for any fans of his. I take no.
I'm sorry.
Honestly, I take no real perspective on this.
I can't.
To be honest,
I can't take someone who spouts such crap and looks like how he does. Seriously, the dude is balding. He's got a very weak jawline. I mean,
let's not attack people for the way they look, though.
Well, no, but he attacks women for how they look. So
okay, well, I think I've known nearly nothing about the guy. I watched one interview that he did. I think that was it. And, well, it was a bit of a mess, actually, because it was the Piers Morgan one, and he was just trying to get him to a straight answer, and there was a lot of... He's not my kind of person. I think I'm more about balance than I am about whatever his mantra is. But I feel a little bit sorry for him in a way, because some of the things he's been attacked about were things that he said on podcasts when basically no one knew him, and they're from years ago, and then people were like, oh, look at these things he's saying. And it's a bit like, I can see how people blow things bigger than they actually are, but at the same time, I do disagree with quite a few things that he said at the same time. But I think that he's someone who will grow more with time and with age. I think some men are like that. I think especially men more than women, they're like that, because you can be a bit more impetuous and you can be a bit more...
I mean, there are some men who kind of stay like that until they're almost on their deathbed, and they're like, "Oh,
trouble is,
wow."
especially if he gets famous and rich from it. Yeah, exactly. I don't know, but
when it comes to people like him who say stuff like that about, oh, depression's not real, anxiety is not real,
right?
It just shows how insecure they are in themselves. Like, they're trying to show how overconfident they are, and how narcissistic they are. Well, but really deep down inside, they're trying to repress, like, I actually do not feel good about myself.
Well, I've said this. I think there's, when it comes to depression and anxiety and things like that, I think there's two routes that people tend to take. I think I'll say women generally, because I think probably because of the, more of the chemicals inside women and men's brains. I'm not an expert on this stuff, but I think they tend to evade more and tend to, evade and try to avoid. Whereas I think men, especially like him, they try to repress and they try to say, oh, nothing's wrong, I'm going to get angry. And actually, I think both ways are an inability to deal with the thing that you're going through. Like I said, I've said many times, is the best thing to do, at least in my own experience and from what I've been taught, is to find balance. And I don't think people like that because it comes across as a bit boring. But balance doesn't mean you don't get what you want, you don't work hard. It just means in those situations you're able to keep steady within yourself and make the best decisions available, right? It doesn't... do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So I think it's a way of trying to process the thing in front of you and use a bit of wisdom rather than trying to evade it or trying to repress it. And I think that's what a lot of people get caught in. Maybe you're right, because that mental health access probably, you see how I looped it around. So
I was waiting for you to...
Well, I think those two prices, maybe it's because of lack of that. But in the same time, even though there's a lack of it, I also think there's a lack of knowledge of what to do as well, in a way.
Yeah. Well, like right now I'm doing CBT, which has actually been quite helpful for me.
Right.
And it's forced me to actually, like, the other day I had to look at like a wheel of emotions.
Yeah.
And I had to, find the emotion to say how certain things made me feel. And I was like, it was a bit overwhelming for me because there were just so many. I didn't even realize it because, the men would probably think, oh, there's only like 4 emotions: angry, more angry.
Yeah. So if you had to choose, what would you say, the US or the UK on healthcare then? So
US.
You got a biased view.
Yeah, I have a biased view.
If you lived here maybe 20 years ago, I think you would say the reverse.
I do have
if I'm honest.
I do have a biased view because whenever I've needed something, I've never been ignored.
Thing is, though, the strange thing is I'm not particularly a political person in the sense that I'm not party affiliated. But there's a very interesting statistic that every time the Conservatives get into power in central government, the waiting list on the NHS becomes a lot longer, and every time Labour get in, it goes down. Now, what do they make of those figures? I don't know, but I think you have to say you can see who cares about the issue more from that one graph, I think, to be honest with you. And I have to say, I think a lot of the issue, I don't think is just with the NHS in the UK, I don't think a lot of it's just economic. There's
Yeah.
economic reasons why they've had to take some things, but there's a lack of real passion about doing it
Yeah.
within the Conservative government, and that's the bottom line for me.
Yeah. Like,
There's a lack of passion of making it work because a lot of them don't even use the NHS. A
yeah.
lot of the politicians on the Conservative
Of course
Party.
not. They can afford private.
Well, exactly. And there's that lack of passion, and the minority in the party probably don't even want it to
Yeah.
exist.
And most
so-
of them, obviously, they came into money already. They never
Well, I
had to
don't
grow
know.
up probably
We
using
don't
the
know.
service.
We don't know what their background is, but yeah.
But also, like in the US, when I was able to do counseling, the counselor asked me like 3-4 times, it's like, please talk to a psychiatrist. I really wish you would talk to a psychiatrist. And when I finally did,
She's crazy.
she asked me questions.
You're building
and
up
she was
this
like,
picture.
okay, this is, I believe this is what's wrong with you. I want you to continue counseling if you want to try medication, blah, blah, blah. And now I've been trying very hard to get on a list to see a psychiatrist here.
Oh, yeah. Well.
And I finally am now on a wait list as of
Yeah.
today. So it might be a year.
Again, well, it'll be longer than that.
Mhm.
Again, that's a staffing issue, though.
Yeah,
That's
but
something that could be fixed. That's the frustrating
Yeah.
thing about it. That's because they can't get people to fill those roles. But again, we're not educating people about to become a psychiatrist, and when we are, we're expecting too much of them. So of course you're going to have a lack of psychiatrists. And then you say, well, we'll look outside for other countries. It's like, yeah, but so's every other country.
Yeah.
And now we're trying to compete with them. Instead of competing with them, why don't we just train people that already live here to do it?
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not saying it wouldn't be costly or whatever, but the returns over time would be far greater, surely, for everybody. And that's the frustrating thing. It's there, but it doesn't work because they don't care.
no.
They don't care the fact that you can't see a psychiatrist. Not really. Otherwise, they would do something about it already.
And I understand, like, there's very few therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists, and they're probably very overwhelmed because,
Oh, absolutely.
let's face it, everyone's crazy right now. All over the world, everyone's a bit nuts.
Do you think they are, or do you think it's social media that makes them that way? I think it exacerbates.
I think it doesn't help.
Yeah. Oh, well,
Social
anyway, I
media
suppose
does
it's
not
not a
help,
social media episode, but yeah.
No, but we can talk about that later. But I do think when it
I already
comes
have,
to
that's
just,
not trying.
I do think when it comes to general health care with doctors actually answering you and helping you, whether you have insurance or not, I do think US is better. Whereas over here, you're very much shrugged off.
Yeah.
And you have to push very hard. I shouldn't have had to push to get my gallbladder scanned because I had, a couple gallbladder attacks. I shouldn't have had to push for that.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd see if I had done that in the US, the doctor would have been like, okay, I'll send you a referral for an ultrasound.
I know I've said it already, but it's one of those where I don't know if anyone's aware of the politician Tony Benn. Less and less people are now, I suppose, because he died, I think, back in 2011. But anyway, he was considered a far left person. I don't really particularly. He was definitely left wing person. He was an old style democratic socialist, and he was someone that I very much admire. I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, or said. But he made this one idea that in World War II, we invested everywhere. We spent all of our money and all the time just to make everything work because it was considered an emergency. And he said that after the war, all of that time, because he was, he lived through the war, and all of that time after the war, that stopped. All that investment, all of that emergency, all that trying to get things to work the best, just ceased. And he said, well, if we can do it in wartime, why can't we do it outside of wartime? And I have to say, I agree with that in the sense that, all right, it doesn't have to be quite that state of intensity because there's no war, but at the same time, don't we want things to work? Why aren't we putting that much effort into everything that we're doing? And that's really it. And that's really the health system right now. It can work, but there's no passion, there's no desire to make it work. It's all there. Everything is needed there. It's all well and good building new buildings, but there's no one to be in them. No one wants to.
No
be
one
in
to
them.
staff them.
So what's the point? You remember that? I think it's Burma, isn't it? They built like a new capital city, and no one lives there.
They had like what?
It's going to be a bit like that.
Dictator or something. I don't remember.
Was it Burma? I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Where they built that highway, and the guys from Top Gear played football on it. Yeah, that was really cool.
It was like 16 lanes or something. Those lanes need to
and the police
exist too in
joined
a
in
lot
as
of
well, didn't
places.
they?
Yeah,
That was really funny.
haven't gotten none to do. The road was empty.
I haven't watched that in ages. I think they're doing one more special, aren't they?
I think so.
See, that actually, well, they, they're from the UK.
Yeah,
So-
but they travel everywhere.
Well, but they're from here.
I'm going to tell you this. They probably really like the U.S. And I know they liked driving in the U.S. because you could turn right on red.
Oh, don't even get me started. I always forgot, and people were behind me just getting impatient. I was like, what's the matter? Well, you can turn.
So
No, I can't turn. What the?
Unless the sign says that you cannot, you can turn right on red if no one is coming.
There's just something so against the grain on it, though, when you see that red
No.
light, isn't there? And you keep moving forward. I don't know.
I just remember you kind of internally freaking out when I did that the first time.
But,
You're just like, what? Why'd you do that?
Well, the thing is, though, we have filter lights here. I get the point. When it's red, you can make the turn, even if, as long as it's clear and you look.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know why I want it. It's just so...
It alleviates traffic, much like the UK thinks that
Do you know what
roundabouts do.
it reminds me of? I did this, it was last year, you might remember, I did, it's called a rollover course.
Yeah.
Essentially, it teaches you how to, the point you would, if you're driving a truck or a lorry, the point at which it would roll over. It's on stabilizers, and you drive it in a circle really, really fast. Well, I say fast for like a half full tank, and you're driving it round maybe at like 25 miles an hour,
Yeah.
and you steer it really harshly, and you just see in the mirror it go like that. And the thing is, it's so against the grain because it's coming, and it's so against the grain. I don't want to roll this thing over. And your instinct is like, just keep it straight, don't get in. And there's the guy next to the instructor, and he's just saying gas, 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 and you're just like, oh no, and you just see it go over a bit. You're like, oh, I don't know. It's one of those, isn't it? When you see that red light, it's a bit against the grain.
No. But I've also had to
Maybe.
drive in, very deep snow and ice. So I've had to
You
learn
don't
how
really
to
have to do that here. That's a benefit. We don't really have snow, at least in the south, where
Yeah.
we are not, because this is an undisclosed location.
The only time I really miss snow is between Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, because it's it's that time where you want that white
Do you know-
Christmassy.
I'm going to say something really sad.
Oh God, what?
I've never had a white Christmas. Never in my life. And
I have to say, I've only had very, very few white Christmases.
I've
The snow would always come after Christmas.
we didn't get that. I've never had one. It always come in February, when the most
February is the coldest
deepest,
month.
the most deepest, depressing month of the year, and it would come then. So I don't want it now. I wanted it 2 months ago when it would have meant something to me.
Well, remember the first time you came to the US, you got to see all that snow. And how terrifying it is.
Yeah, I got to see it all right. We landed in it.
Yeah.
We landed in an ice storm. And when actually, there was this girl sitting next to me. I think she was from Essex or something. And we'd been talking on and off throughout the flight. But when it landed, it was strange. You with planes, as you probably know, you come in the clouds there. You're above the clouds, then you go mid with the clouds, and as you come on the runway, the clouds are sitting low because they were heavy with all the ice and everything.
Yeah.
And it just come in right at the last second, and you could see everything. The runway was there, and it landed. He didn't quite bounce it, but when he hit it quite hard where you couldn't see, the wing just wobbled, it almost hit the runway. And I was like, wow. And everyone clapped, and then the Essex girl next to me, she just went, "Oh, well, that wouldn't have happened in England, would it?" That's the most terrible Essex accent I've ever done. But it just, I don't know, it did. Just sometimes I get those moments that just encapsulate when someone says it. It's like, oh, that wouldn't have happened. I was like, no.
But either way,
it wouldn't have happened.
either way, you made it. You're alive. But you got to see all that
Oh, that's
snow.
great. Yeah. That's great.
You got to see, and the snow stuck
Do you
around
know,
the whole time you were there.
The worst, also, when I landed there, because everything was delayed because of all the icing and all the rest of it, and they couldn't get the door open on the plane because it was frozen, closed, all kinds of things. And then just because they couldn't get the door open on the plane, right, by the side of us, I think it was an Emirates flight landed, or was it Saudi Arabia, some area like that. It landed next to us. And most of thought, oh, that's cool. It was like a really big plane. I couldn't say when it was. Had an upper deck. I don't think it was a 747. I'm not sure. I think they make that. Anyway, that land, I thought that's really nice. It was really interesting to see. And then by the time we opened the door and we got to the security checkpoint, everyone on that plane next to us had got off. And that would be fine, but it was my first time going to the US, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I had to wait in the first line, the really long one, because I couldn't fast track because I'd not been before. That's how the system works. So I got stuck behind every person that came from like Saudi Arabia or wherever they came from on that flight.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious, and
No.
and that's I don't want to sound like, you know, but you know what they're like at, you know, security checks. They see all these people from, you know, Arabia and that coming through. They were just taking people into the secondary room like it was like candy to them or something. So, oh, this is a bonus for me.
The
And do you know
weather's already crap. Let's
Well,
make it worse.
that would have been fine after my wait, but the worst part was they dragged me in there as well, into the secondary room, and I don't even know why.
You were the token.
It was just full of people from that flight, and I just thought, this is
Although you
awful.
did kind of out yourself, so.
Well, do you know what? It was a really bizarre situation because the people, the officers, whoever they were, the clearance officers on, I don't know what they're called. I've seen them in a show in Chicago. That's where it was. I've seen them on the show that they do, the documentary style. So I'd seen actually a few of them on TV before. And then we got into the secondary room and they all acted like really terrible people. Like they were the worst. Like you saw on TV, there was this one guy, I think it was like, I want to say it was McCarthy or it was something like Geary, something. It was some Irish name. And on the TV, he was like all smiling. He was like really nice. And then I saw him in the secondary room and he was the biggest. Literally, he was horrible. He was horrible to everyone. He was smarmy. He was like really arrogant, and they were all doing it. They were taking pictures because there were so many people in the room. They were laughing about it, and it was really unprofessional. And the way they're on the TV compared to how they are in reality was scary.
Well,
It was really scary because it was like, these are like, when you're being so fake, isn't it?
When you're being filmed, you're going to act different.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it was one of those where it was. I couldn't believe how. I mean, I was okay because the guy I got eventually was a pretty stand-up guy, and I was like, well, I don't even know why I'm in here. And he was like, well, neither do I. And he just was like, okay, fine. But I felt really sorry for all the people in that room, regardless if they could get through or not, because they didn't deserve that sort of treatment, regardless of why or how they were trying to get into the country. They just. The problem is you can do it because it's an international transit zone. Yeah. So it's international law, not US law.
Yeah.
So they got away with it.
Yeah. If you think that's bad, imagine what probably happens in New York. A lot of them probably go to New York as well, so it probably gets.
Yeah, you thought they would land in something like, I don't know, like a back end of nowhere airport, wouldn't you? Like, oh, hello, howdy, I'm here.
God, I don't know, but I made me miss flying, and now I miss America.
Well, as you know, I still fly. I've got. If anyone was aware of this, well, you probably won't be. What? I got Microsoft Flight Simulator, and I got everything for all the instruments, and I've been flying a lot.
Yeah, and yelling at the
air traffic controllers are really irritating. In the last 4 flights I've done, they've made me go around, which means you get right to the runway and then you have to take off again, basically, and go around again.
You just
4 times.
Cussing them out the entire time.
Wow, they're so irritating. It's like, come on. Anyway, so
now I'm homesick.
So you're going to end on saying you'd rather live in the US. I haven't made this a home for you.
My roots are in the US. What can I say?
All right.
I grew up in a cornfield, right in the Midwest.
Humble origins.
Yeah.
Origin story.
Yes, is the man who, when he first saw an actual cornfield, didn't realize that's what they looked like.
Yeah, but you know when you see Jeepers Creepers, the movie, I know it's quite old now. I was never into it, but I've seen it, and it was like these really big cornfields. You think, that's just a movie. And then you go there, and it's like, well, it is like that. Yeah. It's crazy.
Children of the Corn in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's nice. I love it.
You know why they grow corn there, don't you? Because you can grow corn anywhere. It doesn't matter about the soil.
Well, the Midwest. Illinois and Iowa. I think it's Illinois and Iowa have like a contest every year to see who can grow the most corn.
So exciting.
Yeah.
Edge of your seat stuff, that is. Yeah. You know, on the final day, it must be nail biting.
Yeah. So I think they still do that.
Oh, no, Iowa's in the lead. Oh, no, but there's been a late takeover by Illinois.
But it's nice. It's nice to see that because it's kind of like, because it grows in the summer, so you get to watch it grow and you see how the summer goes on, you know, and then they start harvesting it in the fall, and then you start sneezing everywhere because throwing up everything. But I miss summers there.
Mm.
I do very much. Like right now, it's hot and sunny, and I'm just like, I'm so miserable here.
Actually, I landed in, I virtually landed in O'Hare, Chicago earlier, and that's who I was shouting at because their air traffic control is not up to spec, in my opinion. Anyway,
They don't want you there.
I had a disagreement. But anyway, all I'm trying to say is that they were having thunderstorms and rain, so you're not missing a lot at the moment. That was live weather, so yeah. No, it was, seriously.
But I love thunderstorms. That's another thing I miss. Is thunderstorms. I miss the weather.
I'm trying to cheer you up.
I miss extremes in weather, not extremes in people.
Oh, well, anyway, we better wrap this up,
Yeah,
seeing as you've decided that you would rather live in the UK. So we've.
No, I
No?
don't start lying.
I thought that's what you said.
I said U.S. I'd rather live where my people understand me.
I understand.
Whereas
you.
over here, most of them think I'm from Ireland. So
And call you Kirsten.
and call me, yeah, my job calls me Kirsten. And so if I ever do anything wrong, it'd be like, Kirsten, why'd you do that? I'm like, I'll look at my badge and be like, that's not my name.
Anyway, let's.
We just said my name.
Well, no, we said a variation of it.
Yeah.
So
No, that's not my name.
your name is American Woman.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, I think we'll wrap this up.
I'm tired.
So now you've decided that.
I want to live in the U.S. Goodbye.
Was that like an Anne Robinson impression there? I was like, goodbye.
Yep. Goodbye.
Did she make it in the US?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, she had a show there.
She did The Weakest Link?
Yeah.
She did it in the UK as well. She went international.
Really?
I didn't know.
Because she is from the UK, isn't she?
That was a great show, though.
I don't think it lasted very long. I think it was only a few seasons in the US, but a lot of people liked the attitude.
She was
had.
hardcore. She was a hard lady, man.
Yeah.
Hard lady.
All right, well, I'm going to bed.
You don't want to talk about Anne Robinson?
No, I don't.
But she is the gap between the US and the UK. She's bridged it. That's all I'm trying to say.
What about Simon Cowell?
Oh, no,
or the
don't worry
other
about
ones?
No, don't worry about him.
All the other,
No one cares about Simon Cowell.
So what? You've made it if you've made it in the US and you're from the UK.
No, I'm saying if you make it in both places. Exactly.
Well, she didn't last very long in the US, so there's only a couple seasons of the show, I believe.
Anyway, my point still stands. Okay.
All right.
Thanks very much. Thank you for coming.
First flight of the orbital Discovery, and the shuttle has cleared the tower.
One philosopher asserted that he knew the whole secret.
Welcome home, Columbia. Beautiful, beautiful. Furthermore, the equation E is equal mc squared, in which energy is equal to mass.